Hello and welcome to the next episode of Cylinder Radio. Today I have Kaoru Wang. She is a journalist, a documentary filmmaker, working on updating American education as a whole with a new kind of concept. And she spent significant time in China. And what we're going to be talking about today, I'm actually really excited. We just met 10 minutes ago, and I'm so happy to have her on the podcast because I think perspective is something that I talk about a lot on the podcast, and about how important it is to have perspective that you could get through time, that you could get through travel, all of these things. It's something that's very important that we get out of our bubbles. And we're going to discuss the difference between what things appear to be and what things actually are. And we're also going to discuss the topic of a cultural revolution. Everything that's going on right now in our country seems like there's a lot of turmoil, and there's a lot of different movements and things like that, whether it be Black Lives Matter, whether it be Occupy 2.0, whatever that is, that we have some problems. I think that getting a wider lens of what is going on, including within China, is very important for us to understand what's going on and then how to best navigate it. So Kaoru, thank you for reaching out to me and talking, and I'm so glad that I could invite you onto the podcast, because this is an area that is absolutely a blind spot of mine, and I'm someone who tries to constantly expose my blind spots. So I think that we're going to learn a lot here from you about what's going on in the world, what's going on with China, and how do you compare that to what's going on in the United States. So thank you so much for being here. And I told you, I'm just going to kind of like unleash you just to go off, and I'll jump in from time to time to just give a few thoughts. But I wanted to give you a platform because I think it's extremely important for people with your understanding of what's going on to have a platform.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I guess we talked just briefly. I guess to start, I used to work in journalism, in documentary film and television in New York City. And I actually just got back to America right in time for COVID. I was living in Taiwan for the past 4 years. And last end of 2019, September of 2019, I spent around a month in Xinjiang, which is the western part of China, where where the Uygurs are, there's a kind of a cultural genocide happening there right now. And of course, on the surface, I was there just with family, as a family trip. I had a good time, but there were moments that really scared me. And with what's happening right now in America, with the Black Lives Matter movement, with the pandemic, there are a few things that are quite concerning to me. One of the things with Black Lives Matter, I actually worked with Al Sharpton for some time, so it's actually a topic that's really dear and it's very dear to my heart. Some of my very best friends are African American. And I think it has ignited a lot of really great conversation. But on the other hand, there are a lot of different factions and a lot of different directions where this movement goes. And it's kind of a strange time to be having this conversation during amidst of a pandemic. But I think there are some warning signs that as a half Chinese person that I would like to let the American public know about.
I listened to Melissa Chen on Joe Rogan. Maybe that was probably like 6 months ago, maybe more. And I remember she would just bring up things like these little things that happen, just about like exposure to what information and stuff like that. But the average American doesn't know anything about China, truly, like nothing about what's going on. And then we get, instances of hearing about professors. So, the UCLA professor who was facing like 219 years in prison for selling missile technology to China, or we hear about coronavirus, and we have a lot of these like conservatives like Charlie Kirk saying it's the Chinese flu and stuff, and how China caused this because they eat bats or whatever. Like it's so short, it's so shallow, our understanding of what's going on. We just get little glimpses here, but there's no real connection of the big picture of what's going on. So that's, I guess, what I'm hoping to kind of get your take on.
Yeah, so China has like a 5,000-year history of being at the top, like the central power of the world. And you know, America's a very new country, and if you compare to China, and I don't think America has any concept of how this plan that China has to regain its power, to be to take over the West. And I actually saw this interview from a long time ago with an ex-KGB USSR spy, and some of the things he said just really, really resonated with me. But before I get into that, I actually want to also introduce the concept of the art. There's this very famous doctrine called the art of war. Sun Tzu Bing Fa is what we call it, and I think that it's a very important concept that for Xi Jinping, which is the president of China, and it's the idea that to quote, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. So you see what happened in Hong Kong, and now, you know, and they pretty much are now under the control of China after the national security legislation. And what's kind of brilliant about their methods is they don't believe in weapons, they don't believe in bullets, and they want to create divisiveness and war within the countries, within these democratic nations, in order to take the country down, right? And so going back to this ex-KGB, this guy named Yuri Bezmenov. Okay, he talks about 4 stages of ideological subversion. And when I heard this, it really gave me goosebumps, because I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what's happening. This is exactly the way the Chinese think, okay? And the first stage is demoralization, which takes around 15 to 20 years. And it's to educate one generation of students on the Marxist-Leninist ideology, and without it being challenged, right? So this is, you'll find, like, say, Americans teaching Americans about this kind of ideology. And one of the things they want, the objective is to have a generation where they lack morals and induce guilt. And so that takes around 15 to 20 years. And the next step is destabilization, which takes around 5 to 10 years. And it targets social groups, economic groups, political systems, or culture, right? So it's, you know, weaponizing race is nothing new, okay? Whatever race that may be. And the objective is to demoralize the population, get people to believe the worst of your own society, right? And just have everyone question the norm, right? Then the third, and then it just gets 6 to 8 weeks, then there's the crisis phase. And that's getting these panicked and very demoralized, destabilized people to abandon legal protections and constitutional ideals for political domination. And so when I see a lot of due process happening on social media, it gets me very, very worried, okay? And this is, the objective is to delegitimize the existing systems that we have, right? Getting the middle class to accept a completely new agenda, okay? And then number 4 happens very quick, it's normalization. Eliminate the free market, you know, give a lot of fake promises that you can't deliver. And this stage can last indefinitely, right? And China has, you know, 2049 has this very specific, like, planned, a very strategic plan to overtake the West. And it's not happening just in the US. You're actually very much, Australia is actually their testing ground. This is happening in Australia, happening in the UK. And there's also another saying I want to introduce you guys to, is to strangle you with your own systems, a Chinese saying, where you observe the system, you find some sort of controversy within that system, and cause chaos and divide, right? So you have, say, free speech, right? You know, how you value free speech? Okay, let me start protests on your front door. You value free press? Okay, I'm gonna set up state-run media organizations and spread propaganda, spread lies, right? And then the free market, let's set up state-run companies and sell below cost and take over your industries. So whether or not you believe any of this is true, this is their tactic. This is how they do things, right?
Okay, so yeah, let me just jump in right there, because I'm like taking notes like I'm in class, because this is important, to say the least. If you are saying, like, this is all conspiracy theory, okay, that China's doing this, okay, that's fine. And you know, I've become more of a tinfoil hat person, especially when you look at stuff like Jeffrey Epstein and things like that. Right. But whether you believe that this is happening or not, this is this is what they believe in to be a strategy to take things over. So you can't really argue that this is a belief that they have for how to gain power in the world. You could just have I believe that it's a conspiracy that they're applying that to America if you choose to not believe that. But if you know that this is what they believe is a plan for conquering, so to speak, and then you look at what's happening, they are mirroring one another. I think that's what you're trying to you're watching this, you're going, oh my God. And when you say like understand systems, I remember reading a little bit ago about how there's a statistic that said there are more students in China who pass the AP English exam than we have English students.
Yeah.
Like there are more, there are more students in the high school, Chinese high schools, passing AP English than we have even students in English classes. They have more like clear English speakers in China than we do, essentially. So to say like they don't understand what, how to communicate, in English or Americans' ways or anything like that, that's not the case.
Right. I actually, if you go to my Instagram page, which is at Follow Teach 2, there is a clip of these Australian Chinese students. They're from China. They speak perfect English, and they are fully indoctrinated in the Chinese thought. And even though they've spent a significant time in the West, they are loyal to their party. And I think what we have a society that's very open, and that's what I love about America. But then they are actively taking advantage of that openness. And yeah, I've heard a lot of people kind of suggest that this might be conspiracy theory, and I think it actually is very normal for conspiracy theories to kind of come about, especially in a time of uncertainty. It's actually a term that the CIA invented, to kind of discredit a lot of these. A lot of theories that, I mean, of course, there's conspiracy theories that turn out to not be true, but there are many also that do turn out to be true. Yeah. So it's, so of course, it's what I'm trying to tell people is try to get away from mainstream media, watch things in the entirety. That's why I love your podcast. I love long form content. Watch a speech in its entirety. I'm afraid to say, like, I never listened to a Donald Trump speech ever. I think I saw I listened to his inauguration and that's it. And then I just so happened opened up YouTube and saw he was live at Mount Rushmore. I listened to the thing in the entirety and was quite impressed. And so was quite shocked to see the next day, headlines saying that he was dividing the nation, which I thought was quite inaccurate. But yeah, there, conspiracy theories, yes, their crazy ones do exist, but let's talk about facts. Like in early this year, we have someone like Charles Lieber, who is the chair of the chemistry and chemical department at Harvard, and he was charged with 2 other Chinese nationals. He was arrested for participating in the 1,000 Talents program. And there's also, you can see on my Instagram page, there is a contract that he signed with the Wuhan University of Technology, where he's getting paid a significant amount of money to funnel our intellectual, property to China, right? He has to work there 9 months out of the year. He's there to establish a research center at Wuhan University of Technology, declaring international cooperation projects, cultivating young teachers and PhD students there, organizing conferences, applying patents, publishing articles under the name like a strategic scientist for Wuhan University, right? So the fact that our talent is getting bought and bribed, it shouldn't be, is not conspiracy. That is fact, right? He is in jail right now. And then with 2 other people who are found stealing vials of biological research to want to smuggle them to China. Yeah.
Is he getting charged with treason?
Not treason, just for lying. I'm not exactly sure, but he is in prison. I'm not exactly sure what the charges are. Just that, and then he is just one guy, 3 people, one American. That is one example, but there are, let me see, how many $billion are $6.5 billion of gifts, not just from China, but also Saudi Arabia, Qatar. There's many countries, many other countries as well, but a majority is coming from China, and these are our Ivy League institutions. These is Cornell, Yale.
Yeah.
You know,
And individuals
MIT.
probably go, well, it's just, I'm just here to help provide for my family. And I think I love the phrase, no snowflake feels responsible for the avalanche. As everyone's kind of looking like, it's just a little bit. This one little thing's not going to do anything too crazy. And then, one more thing that I want to just kind of have you go off.
Sure, sorry, I keep talking over you.
No, I want you to. Is how do we avoid racism against Chinese people? Okay, so you're half Chinese. Okay, like how do we avoid me going into my head of going like, wait, maybe Kaoru's here just to like infiltrate, and she's kind of putting it out there like, oh, I'm going to talk bad about China, and then here I'm going to get into this guy who's like trying to make some waves in education, and this is all like, do you know what I mean? Like,
right,
the
totally.
problem is we have to also be conscious of, I don't want Chinese kids coming over here to do school and be told because of this podcast, like, hey, you're a traitor, you're
right.
You're deep in the Chinese thought and you're just pretending. Like, how do we avoid that as well, Kaoru?
I'll admit it's going to be very difficult. It is. I think there are a lot of people coming in with visas from China, and on the surface, they're there to learn. They're there to hopefully get instilled with our values. But I think there does have to be a measure taken. And I'm Chinese myself. I hate to say this, but it's I think America has to be vigilant. I do have an American passport. Maybe that puts me in a place of privilege, but I think there's the Department of Education. They actually did something really great. They tried to make sure that any gifts from foreign entities above a certain amount of money be transparent. I think that's a really good move in the right direction. And there's all, and I say this a lot. University is sort of the guinea pig. It's like what happens in universities is what we're seeing is happening in real life. Like what happened in Evergreen, like Brett Weinstein. Like, gosh, this happened years ago, and it's like people thought it was crazy to think that would happen on our streets, and look what's happening, right? And so we have to be very vigilant, not just with education, because there are I think we have to crack down on the 1,000 Talents program, the Confucius Institutes, which is very what did I saw well, I'll look that up. I'll look it up later, but it's very reminiscent to these programs to indoctrinate and it's not just indoctrinating the Chinese, it's indoctrinating us, right? So American students in Marxist beliefs and ideology. And it's a very enticing idea, right? Marxism, because it's the idea or the promise of this utopian future, right? And it's been tried many times, and a lot of times people think, it's because they didn't understand what true Marxism is. Like if you put the system under another, in another country and another, leader, it's different. But it's who decides what utopia looks like? Who makes the decisions and it's like, the thing about Black Lives Matter and a lot of these like race kind of issues, it's this kind of, it's like it becomes this like competing for the ultimate victim status, which and whoever is the ultimate victim wins. Like that's not a society based on meritocracy. And as many as there's so many issues with capitalism and democracy, I admit, but it is the best of the worst of systems out there. So that's my take on that.
No, I'm with you on that. Like you can, and I'm trying to criticize a lot of stuff that's going on, but also say like, look, I recognize that people are pissed off and it's justifiable. Like we have a lot of things that we need to fix, but maybe this isn't one of them. Like you're being distracted from what is really going on. It feels that way. It feels like, and again, this is tinfoil hattish, but it feels like people in positions of power, maybe here, maybe in other countries, are kind of like playing these games with the working class, the people who are marginalized, the people who don't have, a lot of opportunity coming their way, is they're just pitting them against each other, whether it's, the MAGA hat wearing, working class white guy in West Virginia, and you pin him against, the kid in the, the housing projects of New York. And then if they're fighting amongst each other, they're not paying attention to the professors being arrested for selling this off or whatever it might be. Like, they're not paying attention. They're focusing on just hurting themselves. It feels that way.
Right. I mean, I actually, I think there's a lot of Black Lives Matter as a term is like, how can you deny that Black lives don't matter, right? And there are plenty of, really meaningful and great discussions I've had because of this rise in this topic. And, and I think a lot of good, I don't want to discredit the good that has come out of this movement, because there is, right? I just want to have people understand that there is a bigger war out there. As much as race feels like the biggest war that our country has, there are actually forces who will utilize that weakness that we have, right? Because it's true, we do have obviously we have a racial issue in America, right? I'm not denying that. But then I just want to get people to understand that there are other countries, other people out there who will take advantage of that weakness, right? And like Huawei is the telecommunications company, right? They want to monopolize the deployment of 5G technology, right? And this can decide the next generation of internet communication, right? It can. Like, are we gonna? So, as much as you want to hate the left or the right, I mean, I really want people to make sure that we are not going to be living in a Chinese-defined world in the future. That's my ultimate fear, right?
Is this, when you say that, like, I guess, what would be the end goal of China messing with our system? Is it that they want to push, they believe their ideas are the right ones, so they want to spread it out? Is it like a religious kind of idea like that? Like kind of trying to just spread this idea that they believe to be right? Like, what would be is it that they want to, yeah, like, I guess that's what, do they want to not be threatened by American military? Like, what would you see as the kind of big picture goal for why they would be messing with America?
They believe in centralized government and central power, right? They don't believe in democracy. And it actually, what's interesting about this Black Lives Matter movement, the conversations I've had with my Chinese relatives have been really disturbing to me, because a lot of people are convinced, despite living in America for a very long time, despite growing up in a democratic, nation such as Taiwan, they don't believe democracy. A lot of people don't believe democracy works in China. And then when you say, oh, well, what about censorship? What about all this? They said, well, you don't think America has that, right? You guys have the same thing, right?
Yeah, they're right.
And so it's like, and and it's like, man, you guys have a point. Like, they're like, democracy is chaotic. It's look at how barbaric you guys are acting. This is why. And so it's like, they have this idea that I think is, I'm like, okay, it's difficult to contend with sometimes. But then why am I, having this interview? I'm actually in many ways nervous to have this conversation, because when I was in China recently, it's usually these little things that really would disturb me. So just to give you an example, someone mentioned there was this Uyghur Uprising. They were just killing anybody who looked like Han Chinese like me, and how ridiculous and stupid, and how they just don't understand. Like, how do they not understand how powerful the government is to even try to attempt something like that? And I just said, but I heard, yeah, it's because they want to be independent. And they looked at me very seriously and said, you can't talk like that, you'll get in trouble, right? It's just these little moments, and like, this might sound like a really silly example, but like, I just feel like my face is scanned everywhere I go. So I went to the public bathroom, right? And, in order to get the toilet paper, they scan your face, right? And then like, it's like roll of toilet paper. Yeah. So this roll of toilet paper comes out. I'm like, okay. It was like, okay, what happens if I try to get a little more toilet paper? I rescan my face, nothing comes out. They know that I had like I got toilet paper already, right? So it's like there's, and I get the appeal, because it makes for it's like feel very safe there, right? I feel in it, I don't, like my mom lost her bag, which had like $1,000 in it. And immediately, no problem finding it, no problem like with stealing, right? So there is this appeal to it. But then there are moments where I am experienced the self-censorship, right? And not only, it's not just about like speech, right? It's censorship that happens in your mind, in thought.
Yeah.
And that's what I experienced, which was really unnerving to me, was finding that I was preventing myself to think certain thoughts, which was the first time I ever had that experience. And what scares me today in America is that I'm noticing those moments today that I had in China.
Yeah, and
so
people
that's
are willingly doing it because it's being pushed as, if you think this way, then you are a bad person. People go, I don't want to be a bad person, so I'm not even going to go there, which is why it's so difficult for me to have conversations with a lot of activists right now. And it's actually very difficult for me to have conversations with people on the political right who are like deep, like Donald Trump, everything, like Turning Point USA, people like that, like they won't talk to me either. I think that, you know, we like having this ideology. This is kind of the way that it goes. And for them to even think for a second that Donald Trump could be not the best option, or for people on the, you know, the kind of like the woke left to think that maybe critical race theory has some pernicious elements to it. Like, I'm not going to let myself even go there. I'll send them something very short. Like, here, watch this 5-minute short video. And they're like, I can't watch this. Like, they won't let themselves think.
Yeah. So, you know, people ask me about my politics, and I guess where I stand is just always with America. So whoever becomes our next president, whether it be Biden, whether it be Trump, whether it be Kanye West, like I want to see that person succeed, because I stand for the Constitution. I stand for America, right? Those freedoms. And you know, and I know there's a lot of people complaining out in the world right now, and or a lot of people complaining in America right now. There are millions of people who would switch places with you in a heartbeat to have a taste of that kind of freedom.
Because like, you don't know what you don't know. Like, you don't know what it's like to not have that. I think the face scanning toilet paper, that's just one, that's an example. Now roll that out to just the way you live. And there is something comforting of, like, it's almost like a mommy and daddy thing. Like, it is comfortable to be like, I don't have to worry about, you know, how am I going to wipe my butt? All I got to do is give up this. You know, and like I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they have pretty nice lives because everybody's taking care for them. But they don't get, if they want to go outside and I say no, they don't go outside. And that's kind of the ethos of America from its founding, is you live the life that you want to live. And it might be really hard. It might be harsh. The people who came and established this country, they had a tough time with the early colonies and whatnot. But that's what America is you come here. That's why people are coming here from Mexico. My wife came here from the Philippines. Like, they came here to bust their butt because they said, sink or swim. I want to be able to have the option to sink or swim.
Sure. Exactly. Yeah. It's, you know, so going to education, I know, like, when Bush had the, you know, no child left behind policy, everyone was so against that. And yeah, there are so many problems with that. I mean, clearly many children are still left behind, but then to actually even have a policy that would name No Child Left Behind, that in itself is a revelation for Chinese people. Like, people would never have that concept of no child left behind. It's like, most children are going to be left behind. Yeah. That's their starting point, right? And so just you know, whether the American dream is true or not, it's that this underdog story, this American dream concept, okay, you know, is something we strive for. The Constitution, there's this whole debate now whether our forefathers are even, you know, should even be revered, right? Because they were not able to live up to their very ideals of this of America. But, you know, and that it's true. That's true too, right? They were slave owners themselves. But then, man, that Judeo-Christian belief system that structured the land that we live in now, I think it's good. That's what I believe in. You know, that's what I'm fighting for. And so, you know, I have a lot of, you know, arguments with my Chinese side of the family, you know, about this, and you know, maybe I'm seen as a traitor or whatnot, but I'm what I know of, I don't really actually haven't spent that much time in China. I learned my Chinese in Taiwan, which is also a democratic nation.
Yeah.
And Taiwan is a country, their freedom is very dependent on us. So when we fall, Taiwan falls, right? So seeing what happened in Hong Kong, very, very disheartening for a lot of my friends. And what I'm seeing now in Hong Kong, everyone's now wiping out their social media history, right? Their books that are democratic in nature, Western in nature, are getting thrown out, being replaced by, things that will, communist, Leninist thought. Xi Jinping also spent a year in Moscow to study this way of thinking. And it's really, in many ways, it's brilliant what they're doing. And they have this plan, and it's working, they're going along swimmingly. And for those who are afraid for the future of America, I think I would challenge you to look into, the Chinese history, kind of the plan that Xi Jinping has for us. And if anything, even like the WHO recently, the wife of Xi Jinping was made. She was made Goodwill Ambassador of the WHO and Special Envoy for the women's education at UNESCO. Like, how are they having all this? And then, of course, it's not shown that she's the wife of Xi Jinping, right? And she was also someone who sang to the troops after the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. So, and that a lot of Chinese people to this day don't know about. To this day, a lot of people revere Mao, and he has killed more people than Hitler and Stalin combined.
Yeah.
Right. This is very scary stuff here. We're calling people a Nazi, but it's thinking that's the ultimate the like negative thing you could say about somebody. Like, Mao can be equally as scary.
That's because, and that's because I'm with you on this. And that's why, like, Brett Weinstein and James Lindsay have both said that this is like Maoist. It has the feeling of Maoism. Like, but in schools, and I've had this issue after reading like Solzhenitsyn is about the Soviet Union, is Nazism is taught. I went to Poland last year with a whole group of Orthodox Jews, and it was, it's horrific. Doesn't give it justice. Like, what happened with the Nazis is horrifying. When I was there, I was asking the one tour guide, I said, this is horrific. This is like the extreme right wing. Is there a tour like this? It was a week long. It was like a bunch of different camps. I was like, is there something like this for the former Soviet Union? And he's like, no. Like, they're not going to put it out there about the horrible atrocities that happened, in the gulags and stuff like that. So the kids don't know near as much about the communist, Soviet experiment, Maoism. They don't, it's not in the curriculum anywhere, but Nazism is known everywhere. And everyone goes, if there's someone in hell, who is it? Hitler. Like, it's just the go-to. Everyone compares everyone to Hitler when they're trying to compare to something bad. It's a huge blind spot in our education system that we don't know. And that's something that I heard Jordan Peterson say, and I've said it asking a lot of my progressive friends and stuff. What is progressive? Progressing towards what? Is it utopia? What is too far progressive? We know what too far right is. That's the racial purity stuff. That's Nazism. What is the too far left thing? And how will you know it when you see it? Where do you draw the line of going, that's too far left? Because we know too far right. That's Steve King, I think was his name, who would like say little like racist things here or there, and then basically said, what's wrong with white supremacy? And then Ben Shapiro and people like that were like, what? Nope, screw this guy, I'm out. Like, they hold a line of what is too far right, but I don't know what the line of too far left is, and I haven't heard anyone give that to me.
That's actually that's a really good point. I never really thought of it that way. But with the thing about Mao, and the reason why he's still revered today, and this is actually, I remember Jordan Peterson talking about this. He goes, my house is filled with communist trinkets or whatever. And it's like, if I had Nazi, paraphernalia in my house, people think I'm crazy, but it's for some reason okay for, communist forms of, display. And why is that? So Mao Zedong, to this day, a lot of people think he was a good man. And actually, in some ways, I could see that too, because he did really want what was best for China, right? He wanted, China was completely humiliated during the 1800s, the Opium War, and he wanted to show that Chinese are not like uncivilized people. And he did a lot of things. He created simplified Chinese, he unified China, and he was working towards he was a very much of a patriot. So that's why in many ways people think he did a lot of good for the country. Mm-hmm. But then at what cost? That's what I'm asking, is the cost, like, you know, this is the number of how many people he killed is very difficult to pinpoint. Conservatively, like during the 4 years of the Great Leap Forward, that was like 45 million. You have, you know, people up to 72 million people killed, you know. It's like, how many people starved for the sake of this utopia that Mao Zedong maybe very purely wanted to create, right? That's why it's so difficult. It's so enticing. Like, I actually have a student who's 13 years old, and we're talking about whether or not we think that people are inherently evil or good. And he's a Christian, and so he brought up the Adam and Eve story, which I thought was quite interesting. He goes, I think Adam and Eve were born good, right? And I go, okay, so does that mean we're good, right? He goes, but they had they had the apple of, you know, after they bit into the apple, they received knowledge, and that was that's what had them leave the Garden of Eden and not to return, right? And so in many ways, and I thought that was really brilliant, because in many ways I think Marxism is that concept of wanting to return to the Garden of Eden, but then it's something that we cannot. It's impossible. Of course, it's so enticing and desirable, but it's impossible. It's in the structure of our humanity today. It's never going to happen. And
I've never heard it that way before. That is brilliant.
Yeah, and it was my student. It was like, who really like was like, oh, brilliant, you know, yeah. Like, you know.
I won't engage with this because it might make me think. I won't engage with this. That whole thing of like, there is the ignorance and bliss.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very.
Yeah, it's like, why is it that if an animal like eats another animal, we don't find that evil, but if I kill another person, that is evil? It's through that knowledge of what harms me will harm them, and that knowledge is what distinguishes us from many of this consciousness that we have, is what distinguishes us from different life forms on the planet. That knowledge of what is evil as well as good, right? And so that, I think, is actually at the heart of this Marxist thought, this desire to return to the Garden of Eden, which is impossible for us to do, at least in a Christian framework. So I think to me that's something that that's why it's like, I get it. I understand why Black Lives Matter is enticing. I understand like why Marxism is so, you know, it feeds into that desire for us to go back to the Garden of Eden, back to that utopia. But that utopia is, it cannot return. We cannot return.
Like that's kind of the point of the story. It's like, no, that was the turning point, you know. You know, and I explained in my civics class, so I go back to like through evolutionary biology. It's like Adam and Eve were just, you know, monkey men basically, you know, and it was like the first one that picked up using tools or made themselves self-aware or whatever it was, you know, Homo sapien. That's probably, you know, like when you cross that threshold of animal to knowledge, to being aware of your surroundings, to human or something like that.
Right.
Do we, talking about COVID, I guess, I mean, I heard, again, Brett Weinstein on Rogan's podcast talk about how he believes that it was probably done in a lab and then escaped, not necessarily purposely, but like escaped somehow. Like the WHO interview where the woman, and I'm so glad when things do go viral like this, but like the woman asked the head of the WHO about Taiwan, like, aren't they doing a great job? And I actually have a friend in Taiwan too, and he's, you know, talks about like, yeah, we got this under control, like no problem. And the person from WHO, like the president or whoever it was just like, oh, my mic's not working, and then pretended like that interview was insane, and just, no, we'll just move on. I wanted to ask about China. No, we're not there. Or about Taiwan. No. China's doing great. Like that kind of stuff. What is your take on where COVID plays into this?
Well, I mean, again, I have my suspicions about, and I think what was really interesting about the Brett Weinstein interview, he actually did a really interesting one on Dark Horse with this guy named Yuri I can't pronounce his last name. And he talked about how the science community feels like they're being strongholded to tell a particular narrative. And I also see that a lot in the university systems, like in science communities, where they feel that they need to tell a particular narrative, even though the facts don't say otherwise. And I also find it's very interesting, kind of parallel to this, you have this, with the Black Lives Movement, there's also this synonymous shut down STEM movement, shut down academia movement. Let's remove the statistics, the FBI statistics on, crime, like who's committing the crime, like this desire to say that facts are a form of hate speech. That there's a lot of things layered there, but that's why it makes me suspicious. Yeah. And whether or not this came out of a lab in China, I wouldn't be surprised. That's my take on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if China, and also when I say China, you have to understand that there's American players involved in that too, because they've been bribing Americans and a lot of intellectual property is coming from the U.S. And this is actually something that I learned when I was doing the documentary on education. So the idea of an achievement gap, the socioeconomic gap, or the idea that we are, as Americans, our students are testing way lower than most other nations out there, is the idea that we are falling behind in education in America, right? But then I would also counter that in Asia, you have people saying we have a creativity gap. How is it that Americans are, all these innovative ideas, concepts, creativity, everything is coming out of the US, right? And they are here trying to steal that, right? And they don't realize that it's because of the foundation of that our forefathers gave us that allows us to have this, right? So it's like a lack of foresight to say that, okay, let's take over America, let's take over the West, and let's just force people to become, like assigned. No, meritocracy works. That's why, unfortunately, capitalism is the best shot we have. So the achievement gap, I would say, is to close the achievement gap. Well, closing I would argue closing the creativity gap is much harder to do. And that's something that Americans are very, very good at. And that's why I believe, and actually in many ways, the system of education, in a way, you could actually even argue that because it doesn't work well in America, that's actually what's allowing us to be super creative. Because I would argue that the system of education that we have is actually the same around the world. That's why we have the same hierarchy. Maths and sciences are always on top. You have the arts always on the bottom. And even within the arts, you have painting, on sculpture on the top, you have dance on the bottom. Who decided that structure, and why does everyone around the world agree to that structure, right? So when I was studying about education, it was it was a process of not learning, but unlearning a lot of my presuppositions about how the education system works. And that's why I decided to create this a website called teach2.com, which is in essence sort of an Airbnb of sorts for teachers and educators.
Yes, and I'll tag that in here, and I'll probably be shouting out things on my social media about that, because the idea of it is really important about rethinking education. I heard it said, and I just subscribe to it completely, that in the school system we exchange imagination for compliance, and I see that even when I taught in bad neighborhoods and good neighborhoods, it was a lot of do this work, do these problems, jump through this, kind of like mental obstacle course. But if I say design an obstacle course, they just break down. Like they just don't know how to think. But yeah, whether it's, Google and Facebook, Tesla, it's not a coincidence that this stuff happens here, where people can take all ideas and then pick out what are the best ones. And the fact that I have teachers on the very down low, because no one's speaking up against the social justice dangers in education. No one. It's me. It's me and a few, and now I've gotten a few others that are just a little bit less public, but they reach out to me and say oh man, you're so brave. And it's no, the fact that you see me, and I'm not being humble here, the fact that you see me as someone who reads books and then says, this is interesting, what do you think? That's brave. Sharing ideas is brave in 2020. That's a problem. That we're educators. And the fact that I have shared so much information, I've asked all of these educators, the National Teachers of the Year, now won't talk to me because I've been blocked by all of them. And even the ones I've had on my podcast, and I've had 2 of my podcasts, is they don't want to engage with different ideas, and yet they are the pinnacle of education. It is baffling to me, Kaoru. I just don't understand. How can you be a teacher and be willfully ignorant to information? Like, what are you threatened by? Are you threatened that you're bad? Like, I'm Christian, and I love reading atheist books, because what I've come to is actually, and like, I love Peter Boghossian, like all these people who are like, you know, hardcore atheists and stuff, Sam Harris, but it got me actually closer in faith. So it didn't for him. James Lindsay's like, didn't work for me. Great, but that's fine. And I get along with them. Great. And we just have different beliefs at a very core level, but like, I'm not going to be scared of like reading an atheist book, because then how fragile is my belief in God? You know? And
I was raised by pretty much atheists, and I never really related to the sort of this Christian belief system until I kind of, but then I realized it was actually very much ingrained in me, just having grown up here. And I was very comforted by the idea that Israel was, the meaning of that word is to struggle with God. Right. It's actually, the struggle is actually part of your faith, right? To not believe and to believe, to go back and forth. That's part of the journey. So, you know, and what you were mentioning earlier with, you know, it reminded me of one of my friends who work at UCLA, and there was this professor, of a accounting professor who, you know, had to have police, you know, escorts and because he wanted to just grade his Black students the same as white students.
Yes.
And I mean, I don't know how this is not white supremacy when you have a white student saying that that's unfair, like you gotta, you know, like pretty much harassing this teacher. And then I talked to a friend of mine who's actually a professor at UCLA, and he goes, well, there's nothing you can do about it. Like, he's very much like he's given up. Like he's saying, well, you cannot fight with the mob. Right. And so there's that, I understand where that fear and that compliance comes from. And that's, you know, a lot of times that's how this works. It's part of the plan, right? And I have you know, one of the kind of inspirations I had for even to create this platform, this website that I'm in the beginning stages of creating, is I have a friend who, you know, I won't say her name, I won't say which school she teaches in, but she's Jewish. Her grandmother survived the Holocaust. And she was teaching in an area that's very heavily Orthodox Jewish. And her students were all Black and Hispanic. And they were extremely racist towards Jewish people. So there was one, and then they didn't know that she herself was Jewish. And so one day she brought in pictures of other, like multiple different Jewish people from different ethnicities, and said, who here is Jewish, right? And of course they take down like the ones who are Black, Hispanic, they're of course going to say, though, these people are not Jewish. And when she said everyone here is Jewish, every one of these people are Jewish, the kids started throwing chairs, and one kid got so upset, through the table across the room, was so upset by the concept that another Black and Hispanic, a Black or Hispanic looking person was Jewish, right? And so she had to teach a class, a 45-minute class on the Holocaust. And she was saying, I, in good conscience, cannot teach these kids about the Holocaust in like 30 minutes, right? And so what she did behind the administrator's back, if anyone found out about this, she would have gotten into really major trouble, or if not fired. She created a 1-week curriculum, you know, where she just taught the Holocaust. Day one, she gave every student a name, with a name of a Jewish name, and they had to go by that name, right? The next day, she talked about her grandmother's experience with the Holocaust. She said to me, man, like in my entire, like I've been teaching special ed for so long, these kids cannot concentrate. That was the first time you could hear a pin drop, right? End of the week, she actually somehow managed to bring them all to a Holocaust museum. Every single ticket had a name on it that matched the name that they were called for the entire week, right? So they had this emotional connection with that name, with that person, right? So not only did they go to the museum, when they checked, when you come out of the museum, they tell you whether that person is still alive or not today, right? So it's that, just 1 week, right? Just give teachers like the chance to do what they want. With 1 week, they can change that kid's life, right? This is, I want to create a space where teachers, good teachers, have the space to teach what they want to teach what they're passionate about. You know, I'm a humble teacher, like teaching English to Chinese kids, to Taiwanese kids. You know, what I found with a lot of my Taiwanese students, like what you mentioned, they're not really taught to think critically. They're looking for a right and wrong answer. So what I actively am trying to teach is subjects where there is no right and wrong. You know, there's this great lecture by a Harvard professor, Michael Sandel. He talks about law and ethics. You know, we use that as a starting point. We use Jordan Peterson also as a starting, you know, and I always tell them, do not ever feel pressured to believe what I believe. You know, the decision, and there's no right or wrong answer, right? That's where I always start. And so I just I lead them with a series of questions. And that also loops back to being a documentary filmmaker, to be a storyteller. I used to always think like, I have to educate, you know, the public. I have to educate the audience. What a like, you know, like it's, the audience always wins. The audience is always going to be smarter than you, right? All you can do, and I actually taught a class in one time in Columbia University where I used the, at the time, this is like a long time ago, and it was a Hangover. The Hangover series was like really big. And it was like, why is that movie so entitled? Like, how have they made like 3-4 movies about this, right? It's because they ask a series of questions, right? And they don't give you the answer. They just they bring on a journey through questions.
Oh, interesting. Right? Yeah. Like,
and
what
so
happened last night? Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's how I see myself as a storyteller. That's how I see myself as a teacher. I'm not here to tell you to like, and you know, and hopefully whoever's listening right now, I hope that you can understand that whatever I'm saying, I don't want you to believe anything I say on face value. Do your research, decide for yourself. You have what I come very humbly with the belief that you know more than I do. Use your life experience, use your own mind to come to those decisions. I'm just posing a series of questions for you, and you guys decide on the answer. And where I stand, always for America, always for the Constitution, always for, you know, freedom and liberty, justice for all, no matter your color, race, and creed. That's it. That's all. That's what I stand for. Not any political party. You know, I do not, you know, of course, you know, we are in a very chaotic time in American history, but I hope people can also look beyond that, you know, and see that there is also a cultural war that is, and the next generation is at stake, right? And the future of America is at stake. And whether or not you believe this is all a hoax, this is all conspiracy theory, I hope that, yeah, I just, at the very least, pose some new questions. That's it.
Yeah, let's talk about it then. You know, I mean, that's, I was listening to a guy, Levinowitz, I think was his last name. He wrote a book called Natural, and he was talking about how he doesn't like the dividers. And I'm the same way. I'm like, people who are trying to unite us together, those are my people. The people who are trying to divide are not my people. And he brought up a point that was like, essentially, well, even that's dividing, because you say like, oh, like, you know, you go to like the woke people and you say like, those are the dividers and I'm the uniter. But I had to reach out to him and explain this. The reason why I believe that I'm on the right side and I believe I'm the good guy is not because I'm smarter or more moral or anything. I really don't think I am. I think that because I am willing to talk and engage with anybody about anything, puts me in the closest thing I can find to the right path. I don't know what the right path is, but the fact that I'm willing to engage and other people aren't, I have to decide that like, that's, I guess, the best thing I can figure for, because at least if I'm willing to engage, I can get to the right ideas. So maybe that's just like at the core of something that we have to really promote, is just be willing to talk, even with people that you disagree with. I had Daryl Davis on my podcast. I had him on again. But like that idea of like the KKK, I'm going to go talk to KKK members. I don't care if you're a bad person. I want to talk. And the people that are not interested in talking, or not willing to talk, or not willing to engage, I don't know. And maybe that's not right, but that's just where I'm at. I'm like, that's got to be the wrong path. And the willingness to talk, even be proven wrong, has got to be the right. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Is that?
Well, I mean, I think as much as racial diversity is important, so is diversity of thought, right? And, I had this conversation about affirmative action with my student, and he was saying, oh, that doesn't make sense that, it's harder for Asian people to get into Harvard than an African American or Hispanic person, right? And I said, hey, okay, well, that good. If that's enough, I'm like saying, you're maybe biased because you're Asian yourself. Okay, but what about this? I have a student, I have a friend who went to UPenn, engineering student, and she said it was like not leaving Korea. It's like not leaving Asia. It was like everybody was Asian. She's like, what about that? He's like, oh, that's weird too. I'm like, so I understand both sides of the argument. Yeah. I'm not trying to question like where that comes, that sentiment, I get it, right? But then also, what about what about the diversity of thought? What happens when you have, so this is, going back to this cultural war, right? And the reason why I'm not going to play this kind of political game, if Trump wins, you don't think that this cultural war is going to stop. It's going to just be amplified, right? And also if Biden wins, it's going to go a different direction, but it's still there. The cultural war, that's my personal belief. I think it's something that we need to really address, right? So what happens if we have have universities where everyone thinks the same, right? Everyone is for Trump, everyone's against Trump. What then, right? Like, what if there's a kernel of truth that you can find from your enemy, right? That could, give you a ton of insight. What happens then? And maybe it's offensive, right? Maybe it's something you're not ready to hear at the moment, right? But then what if that can actually completely could change you in a good way or a bad way? Who knows? But then I think people are smart and they can make those decisions for themselves. And it's not for the government. It's not for anybody to tell you what to think. That's my stance.
I love it. Yeah. And just curiosity. I met a guy like maybe a year ago. Now he's a good friend, but he went to Harvard. And the first thing I asked was like, oh, isn't that crazy? The fact that they hold these higher standards. And he's like, well, and he broke it down. He's an Indian guy, but he was like, well, here's the thing. He's like, if they only took test scores and GPAs, then it would all be Asian, and it would all be kind of like bean counting Asian people. Like it wouldn't be, you lose the creativity. And again, it goes back to diversity of thought. Is like, like actually holding a higher standard for the Asian students, even though there's problems with that for sure. Cause just like Asian is all the same, like, Laotian is the same as Korean, but anyway, right. but like that idea of like, we want diverse thinkers is really at the core of it. And that one conversation, it was 3 minutes, made me go, oh man, I thought I just figured it out that this was a bad thing that Harvard was doing. Nope. Right. Every time I learn something new, I just get more confused. I don't know if pro-life or pro-choice is good. I don't know. I can argue both of them better than most pro-choice and pro-life people. And I don't know. And that's kind of where I'm getting with everything is like, I'll argue your side better than you. And I don't know the answer, and you're so confident. You know what I mean?
Right. It's civil discourse. That's it. Like that's also like the idea that we can, two people from completely opposite sides of the world, different thoughts. Because sometimes a divide in thought could be even greater than spatial divide, right? Yeah. What we're finding. But to get those two people to come together, like, and aim for a higher loving kind of place where you don't want harm to be inflicted on the other person. You just want understanding. You want to want compassion. That's why going back to Michael Sandel, I really love him because you don't really actually understand where he lies. He's just there asking questions. Mm-hmm. And he trusts so much the intelligence of his students, right? And that's all I want is like our government, our leadership to trust our intelligence, right? That's it. So I feel you on that. There are many times where I'm like, oh, I grew up in New York City. I've always been a liberal all my life, and I'm actually noticing too, like I have been so like, and I met Donald Trump when I was a child because my mom's in real estate, so it's so I had this impression of him, like a negative impression of him from a very young age, but I have to admit, I always saw him as capable, but I always saw him as a bit of a buffoon, right? But he was never mean to me. He was just like, I was like, wow, he's really full of himself. And and I also hear a lot of stories from my mother about, because he was often invited to, as one of the top brokers, she was invited to his home and to a lot of his events. And so she never really liked him, and I was like, okay, I get it. Like, I don't really like him either. But then, I also have to, when there are things, when he does something good, I have to also acknowledge that, right? Because he is our president, whether we like it or not, right? And so just like, you don't want to convict a guilty person, like an innocent person, in prison. You don't want to also, encourage, to say things are racist or people are racist when they're not, right? I think that's also equally, very. It's very divisive. Not only divisive, but it doesn't help the Black cause at all, right? If you call somebody or an organization or people racist when they're not, that will actually breed a lot of negative backlash. And that's also something, that's why I'm very concerned about a lot of due process happening on Twitter, right? And that, which is once again fueling this divisiveness in our country. There's nothing I want more for America. I just want America to be united. That's very, very simple. And that's, I keep saying the same thing over and over again, but that's where I stand.
No, I just said the thing about Trump is we have like a villain that we can just go to. It's like, it's all his fault. Climate change, his fault. COVID, his fault. Yeah. My grandma got sick, his fault. My dog died. It's really easy.
You have to keep him accountable. Don't get me wrong. Keep that man accountable, right? Yeah. But also don't call him divisive when he's not either. Be honest. That's it.
Okay, so crew, I am so happy we met.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad.
I think we're going to be working together, and I don't know how, but I want to support what you're doing. I want to amplify your voice. I think you and I think we have the same goal in mind, and I think we come from different kind of experiences, and we've kind of arrived at the same place. And I think that we can bootstrap something that's really important. Where can people find you? Connect with you. I know that I have teachers listening, and if it's a teacher listening to my podcast, then they're a teacher who I think is on the right path. Because they're willing to engage with whatever, different opposing ideas, like the whole cylinder radio thing. Where can people find you, reach out to you, and things like that?
Yeah, so the website I'm creating is www.teach2, that's teachii.com. We're very early on, we're just creating a beta. We're trying to aggregate, teachers. This is, if you're a professional teacher or if you're an amateur teacher, both alike, we welcome you, as long as you could teach something. That's, you're welcome on the platform. This is you could teach anything, anywhere. And this is for live classes. So that means right now, because of COVID, Zoom meetings,
people who are homeschooling their kids and stuff like that is what a lot of it is. It teach 2.0? Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, it's sort of like a 2.0 idea, right? And the idea is, you get free reign on what you teach, what time, your pricing, everything. And and also keep in mind, this is happening step by step. So right now we're just trying to aggregate teachers, and we want this to be a place for teachers to be able to make an income, on their own. But based on their own rules, right? So you have full creative and, financial freedom. It's like having the teacher be the entrepreneur. That's the idea.
Well, I love it. It's very aligned with stuff that I've been kind of saying that we need for a long time. So the fact that you're actually doing the work to make it happen.
We need help. I mean, this is like a very small team. We need, a lot of help. So if you guys are interested in the idea, please, I'm also mostly on Instagram at follow teach2 as well. So please follow me, and I'll be, pushing out notices as to our progress on there as well. Awesome.
I thought this conversation was really great, and I think it was scary.
I'm sorry.
I'm terrified going to my Saturday, but that's what happened when I listened to Brett and James and anyone who kind of is seeing what's going on.
Universities, by the way, should be a place to frighten you, not a safe space. That's another thing I want to say.
Yeah.
It's a place for you to be challenged, for your thoughts and ideas to be challenged. Yeah. So that's an education for you. unfortunately.
Heterodox K-12 education group on Facebook. Kaoru, you should get in there. Also, for the teachers out there who are aligned with this kind of idea, join up with that group. I'm the moderator of it, along with Samantha Hedges, and we are trying to engage in these conversations that teachers feel like they can't have publicly.
Perfect.
So thank you very much for being here, and thank you guys for listening. And we'll take this step by step.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
All right.